Good morning. My name is Alex Allen, and I am doing just a little talk about my interdisciplinary unit that I just created for one of my classes. So the book that I chose for this was called "When the Sparks Fly" by Kirsten Fulton, and this book is specifically about Robert Goddard, the father of rocketry, and Kirsten goes into she begins with his life and how he was a young child. He became sick and wasn't able to go to school. So his parents just kind of gave him the science box. And that's where his love for science and inventions became a passion of his. And so he had explored many different inventors and inventions, and he was just really fascinated with them. So then that turned into a hobby and kind of just really his fire, his fuel to keep him going. And that's why he began just experimenting for rockets and just seeing. He always wanted to go to the moon, so he put his hobby, his passion into a goal of his, and he made it what we now know as the rockets today. So this book lended itself to a lot of many different subject areas, and I found a lot of different ones that I really enjoyed. And this activity was specifically my math, but it was because it was focusing on measurement. But I think that it could lend itself to science as well. So it would be kind of a combined activity. But for the math part, it's really just focusing on measurement. And so I wouldn't have, in the book, he had used like hydrogen and oxygen and things like that. I wouldn't do that just because of the explosion aspect of it. But I would use many different reactants. And so, baking soda and water, and then like adding just different things and seeing what it happens and stuff. That's what my plan would be. And so, I would have many different resources for them, and they would measure it out. So they would practice their measuring and their exact calculations of it. And so even if like they did baking soda and water, if there was a certain amount that they were supposed to do, like if like 1 cup of water reacts to a half cup of baking soda, but they put a whole cup instead, we would talk about that and compare and contrast. And so he talks about just his measurements and his calculations a lot. And so I think that lends itself really well to connect with the book. Another activity that I enjoyed, this came from an inspiration from one of my teachers. And she is an arts teacher. She loves to just teach through the arts. And so what that specifically would look like for my students, the activity would be they would pick an inventor and an invention. So some inventors came up with a couple little things, but I mean, if they would pick one specifically. So for instance, if I would choose Robert Goddard, he invented the rocket. And so it would be a wax museum fashion. So they would have this inventor and this invention, and they would be creating just like a show for for not just their parents, but for the students. And so they would showcase like who Robert is and what his invention was and maybe how it impacted the world. And so this would be for the arts, but it would also tie into history, because they would have to learn about this person, and they would have to research and do that kind of thing. So I really liked that activity. Another one that I liked was journaling. It was for my English language arts. Robert talks a lot in the book about how he has journals and how he talks about his research, and his journals are mainly just for his calculations, but I would like to use this as just not just their calculations, but also just like their life and how sorry, I'm saying a lot. How they're observing everyday life, just to kind of get them talking about themselves, and we would do it in a journal style, or like letter style. So dear journal or dear diary, whoever wants to do that, and then we would make sure to write the date, so that would get this practice with the format of letters, but it would also just be in a less like intimidating way than creating letters. And so that was basically my 3 favorite activities, and hope you enjoy them.